اوكي طيب خلاص ممتاز نشير. Okay. So can you see that?
Yes, doctor, we can.
Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. So we're what is it that we're doing today? We're doing the Sign of Four, and the Sign of Four is a novel, which makes it like Wuthering Heights. But is it the same as Wuthering Heights? You wouldn't compare the two. Wuthering Heights is very bulky, like you have seen, full of themes and ideas, and they are all serious and very, um, you know, very, I mean, the ideas there are very relevant to the age, the Victorian age, and you can almost tell what used to happen in the Victorian age reading the novel. When we spoke about Wuthering Heights, if you still remember, we spoke about it as being multi-generic, as being, um, relating in one way or another to the idea of home and the idea of abroad in the Victorian age. This time around, we're also talking about home and abroad, but the novel this time around is different. Um, in terms of genre, it's easy to classify the Sign of Four, but it's not easy to classify Wuthering Heights like we established. Do you still remember? If I ask you about the genre of Wuthering Heights, would you be able to tell me what genre it is? I'm asking you.
No, it's a different type of genre.
Yeah,
There's
it's
domestic and gothic, romantic.
yes, it's a lot of things. It's gothic and it's romantic. It's what else? We said that
Domestic,
it's domestic. We said it's a realistic.
revenge.
Yes, it has an element or a measure of revenge to it. But when you talk about the Sign of Four, it's very straightforward. You're going to say that it's a detective novel or a detective fiction. Okay. Okay. طيب. So if we talk about the themes and the ideas, it is true that detective fiction is, like I said, light-hearted, not heavy, based. It's the prototype of the thrillers that we have nowadays. But it is also inspired by ideas in the age, as we're going to see. Um, do we have also talk about the idea of home in the Sign of Four? Yes. Do we also have ideas about abroad? Very much indeed, because the whole novel perhaps starts and ends and revolves around the idea of India. Remember, India was part of the British Empire, and lots of British people would go to India in order to work there, whether as soldiers or as administrators. And of course, they come back with stories to tell, impressions about India. They also come with money, they come with treasures. So India is rooted in the novel. You cannot really understand the Sign of Four if you don't study the situation in India at the time, especially something called the Indian Mutiny. The word mutiny means revolution or rebellion. Um, so there was a rebellion or a revolution, and obviously you don't rebel or you don't set a revolution unless there is something that would trigger that. You're not happy about something. And obviously the Indians were not happy about something. This something is, of course, the British presence in India, the British occupation of India. And of course, as occupiers, the English are not the best people. They steal people and rob them of their property and their money. They treat them not as equals. They look at how, their skin color, and they believe that as white, they are better than any other race. Of course, you're familiar with these ideas. So we'll talk more about that later. So let's focus now on the genre. So what did I say about the genre of the sign of four?
Deductive.
Yeah, excellent. It is detective. Okay. And I would like you to unpack the word detective. Detective comes from the verb what?
Detect.
Detect. Yeah. And what is to detect?
To search about something.
To track something. So, and you track something down in order to find it. So you're looking for something or searching for something, like Abdurazi is saying. Okay. So in a detective novel, so what is it that people detect?
Crimes.
Usually
Yeah,
crime.
they did. There is a crime, can be murder, can be theft, can be both. And we're detecting um, um, things that would lead us to the culprit. The culprit is the one who committed the crime. Okay? And you detect details. Okay? And then after you have collected the details, you do what with the details? You threw them out of the window?
Analysis. To analyze
You
them.
analyze, you put the details together, and then you start to filter them, and you say this is important and this is less important, right? And you focus on the important details, and then you analyze them, and then come up with conclusions. You say, yeah, I did the analysis, and this is what I came out with. What do you think of this kind of fiction? Would that appeal to you? Do you think this is interesting?
Yes, kind of.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Why? Why do you think this is interesting? Why wouldn't you read
To solve a
Wuthering
mystery
Heights?
and to think
Yeah,
about how to do.
excellent. Yes, because it actually appeals to your mind, because it stimulates and provokes your mind. You yourself, you find yourself more of a detective, somebody who is also looking for those details and putting them, somebody who puts them together in order to come up with insights and understanding as what happens. So you yourself find yourself um, one of the characters in the detective novel. See? Okay. So detective fiction or novel, which is based on the idea that we have a case. We have a criminal case, if you like. Can be murder, like I said, and it can also be some kind of theft. Okay, so if we're going to detect, obviously, as readers, we're not the only people who are going to detect. Who else is going to detect the clues and put them together?
The main character in the book.
Yeah, we have a character whose job in the novel is to investigate, the case and the crime by detecting, and we call him the detective. Okay, so the character of the detective is a very important character in a detective novel. Together with you, I told you that you yourself, when you read the novel, you yourself become a detective and an investigator, because you find yourself, without knowing, also collecting the clues, collecting the details, significant and insignificant, and you're trying to put them together and come up with a conclusion. Perhaps this guy, because he did this and that, this and that, this and that throughout the novel. And it is my belief that he is the culprit. He is the one who committed the crime. Right? Okay. So this is detective novels. I don't know, prior to this class, are you into detective novels? Do you catch yourself or yourself sometimes reading detective novels or watching detective movies?
I read Agatha Christie novels.
Nice, very interesting. Yeah, well, this is very detective. Yes. Who else?
Also, me, I like Conan cartoons.
Nice. What's your name?
Asma.
Asma. Nice, very good. Okay.
It's also an anime called Death Note. It's very
Mm.
famous. It's about like this a murder and
Nice, very interesting. So, actually, what you guys are saying is based on the detective in its early forms. In its early forms, it was novels by Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't know whether you're familiar with the name Arthur um Conan Doyle. Conan. He is an English author or novelist, a detective author, and he is normally associated with the character of Sherlock Holmes. I'm sure you may have heard the name before. Sherlock Holmes, the character
there
of
is
Sherlock.
movies about it.
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes is the main character in most of the detective novels of Doyle. Okay, and the novel that we're doing today, The Sign of Four, has what's his name? Has um, Sherlock Holmes as the main character. Uh, in One of the elements also of the detective novel would be that you normally have a support character. You have a character who is not a main character, who is kind of helping the main character, the detective. So you have Sherlock Holmes if you're doing a novel by Conan Doyle, you normally have the Sherlock Holmes series of novels. And like I said, you have Sherlock Holmes, the investigator or the detective, and he has his assistant, Dr. Watson. Um, okay. So where is the setting of detective novels, English detective novels? Where do you think they set their detective novels? Logically,
And in
in
Sherlock
And
Holmes,
British?
usually in London.
London, in England, right? Yeah, it's only natural. So, and if you have detective novels in London, and you have so many of them, so obviously detective novels are about crimes, right? And the writer normally gets inspired but by what happens in society, right? If you open any newspaper in any culture or in any country, you're going to have a whole section on crimes and criminals, right? So if I tell you that in the 19th century, towards the end of the 19th century, this kind of novels was very popular and very widespread, would the conclusion be that London was violent, that London has a high rate of crime? What do you think? I'm asking.
Maybe because most of it fiction novels, so it's not necessary that London was a high-rated place of
Well,
criminal.
remember when we spoke about the idea of home, we said that home is about security and safety, but there was a part that nobody is shedding light on. There is no spotlight on the fact that London was also a place where you have so many poor people, right? And if you're poor, you don't have access to food or money or jobs. What do sometimes people do if they don't have access to anything? They don't have a job, they don't have money, they don't have food.
They are going to commit crimes such as
They,
theft,
yeah,
for example.
yeah. This is one of the sordid realities of London. That this is the part that nobody talks about. That London had poor people. That London had a high rate of crime and violence. Okay, so the people of London, the Victorians, when you ask them about that, they either deny it and they say that we live in the best of all possible worlds and we don't have any issues. And they either deny it or they say, yes, we have crimes, we have violence, but it's not because of us as people of London. It's not because of us as Victorian people. It's because of the foreigners. Remember the idea of abroad? When you said that the sense of abroad is associated with whatever is from outside, people coming to London and to England from the colonies, from India, from Egypt, from the West Indies. Okay? So if they admit that there is a crime or there are crimes, they say, no, it's not us. We are angels. Now we're white, we're green-eyed, we never make errors or mistakes. So who does it then? They say it's the people from outside. And that would bring the idea of abroad in the novel. Okay? Right. So in a detective novel, you had a solution at the end. The mystery is resolved, right? That's why we have the detective. So what kind of message is having the crime resolved at the end of any detective novel? Do you think there is a reason for that? And sometimes you have novels that are open-ended. You don't know who did what. Why do writers insist in the 19th century that novels, detective novels, end with a solution? Solution means that they found who did what. Why? I'm asking you. What the logic?
Because they show
I
us the failure of the criminals.
They are trying to reassure people. يطمنوا الناس. They're saying, they are trying to say crime is under control. See? So the novel here, with its resolution is meant to give people the message that you don't have to worry. We eventually will catch the criminal, and he or she is going to be, he or she is going to go to jail. Isn't that a nice conclusion?
Yes, doctor.
Yes. This is what is happening with detective novels. Okay, so let's talk about detective novels in terms of history, how it evolved, how it developed. Where are the first detective novels, and whether they were in England or somewhere else and stuff like that. So the earliest detective fiction in the English-speaking world was The Murders in the Rue Morgue, written by the American Gothic short story writer and poet Edgar Allan Poe. So Edgar Allan Poe, the very famous detective novelist, American, he was American, is the one who perhaps started it. He is the one who started this kind of genre and he started it by The Murders in the Rue Morgue in 1841. Okay, so the beginning, as you can see, is not English, it is American. So this is about novels that have, crimes, and those crimes are resolved at the end. Let's talk about when they exactly started to use the word detective novels, or detective police, or detective character. So the earliest use of the term detective was in an article in the Chambers Journal. This is a journal or a newspaper in 1843. And it referred to the work of the detective police. Okay. So let me ask you, are detectives part of the police force?
Yes.
No.
No, they are not. We're talking about private detectives. And you would ask me, weren't the police enough? No, they were not enough. They were not very reliable. So the reason why we have private detectives at the time was because the police kind of were not able to kind of overcome crimes and curb them. See? Do we have other works, literary works, where there was also elements of detection and everything? Yes. The novels of Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is a very famous English novelist, and he lived between 1812 and 1870. And he is the first who applied the term in its current and professional sense, referring to the idea of detective investigators, and making this distinction between those detective investigators and ordinary policemen. Are you getting the point?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. So remember when we spoke also about the 19th century as being the century of education and literacy in England. So people would read newspapers, they would read letters sent to them from their loved ones and relatives in the colonies. They would read novels, and they would also read detective novels because it was a source of entertainment. It was reassuring. As a Victorian reader, I would read detective novels to be reassured that crimes do not pay and that crimes are under control. And I would read them also for fun because they provoke my mind. They make me think, right? So detective novels started to become very popular, and they used to put them in magazines and newspapers. If we talk about the characteristics of detective novels, the elements that you normally find in a detective novel. Okay. So typically, from its beginnings, we're talking about the characteristic. It's a single criminal. We normally have a single criminal case. It can be a murder or a theft or sometimes both, like we said. And it gets solved through the concentrated action and efforts of a consulting detective. Like I said, this is a private detective that you would call or ask to come over to investigate it. And of course, you have narrative with details that would lead people to the culprit. So central to the plot development of detective fiction is the ability of the detective to amass or to collect data from the case. So this is the work of the detective. He collects data from the case and he starts to distinguish between relevant and irrelevant information. Okay, so at one point he doesn't discriminate. He collects all types of information, whether they are relevant or not. And then comes another stage where he starts to eliminate unlikely or impossible scenarios that are illogical or implausible. Implausible means they are not possible. And then he starts to draw the correct conclusions. And there is always one possibility or one conclusion, not so many. See? So this is how it works. You have a crime. You have a crime, and this crime can be, like we said, can be a murder or a theft. So what's happening? Do you call the police? No, you don't call the police. You bring in a detective, a private detective, because you trust their ability to solve these kinds of crimes. So how different is this detective from the regular policeman? He has this ability to amass and collect data. And then after that, he filters the data in order to put the relevant information together and then put the irrelevant. So if you have irrelevant information, you do what with them? You eliminate them, you drop them, and then focus on the relevant, and you try to, like Abdul Razzaq said, you try to analyze the data, the relevant ones, so that you can come up with a conclusion, with a solution. Can I have many solutions in a detective novel? I'm asking you. Can I have many
No.
solutions? No,
Usually one.
No.
only one solution. Okay. So what else? What do you think of the detective? Do you think he should have intellectual powers? Do you think that he would need to use science? Yes, of course. The Sign of Four, in the Sign of Four, the novel that we're doing, we have Sherlock Holmes, who is referred to in the novel as the only unofficial consulting detective. Remember, he is unofficial. Unofficial because you have the officials, you have the official policeman. And the last and highest court of appeal in detection. This is very proud of him. He believes that he is the last and highest court of appeal in detection. This is what he said about himself. I mean, he's trying to say that people come to him when they have done everything, but they didn't find the murderer or the one who stole something. Again, as a detective in the 19th century, where science predominates, he uses scientific methods. He uses the scientific method of investigation, and he practices what he calls the science of deduction. What is deduction? Deduction means,
استنتاج.
excuse me?
استنتاج.
Yeah, very good. Istintaj. See? So which means that you have a picture, you put the clues together and come up with a conclusion. You collect relevant and irrelevant information about the case, and then you sit down and you start to filter them. And then you start to establish logical relationships. And at the end, from those logical relationships, you say, yeah, this is the culprit. Sameh is the one who did it. Mona is the one who did it. So this is called deduction. Okay, and this art and science of deduction is based on what? Is based on the idea of eliminating the impossible. When you eliminate or drop or remove whatever is impossible, whatever is unlikely, and what remains would be the truth. Isn't that how we do stuff in life? In order to come to certain conclusions, isn't that what we do? If you're doing an exam, for example, let me give you an example, and you have a multiple choice question. Okay, so one of the questions is multiple. You have 4 choices in a question. What do? Let's assume that you don't know any of the answers. You don't know any of the 4 possibilities or the 4 choices. There is this technique of elimination. Elimination is that you remove something. So this technique of elimination would depend on taking off and eliminating whatever you think is so irrelevant, so impossible in the answer. So you eliminate A, you eliminate C, and you eliminate B, and you end up, remember you have 4 choices, which means A, B, C, D. Okay? So you don't know any of the choices. So you start this technique of elimination. You start with whatever you think is so impossible. And this is A, for example. So you end up having how many choices left? 3, right? B, C, D. And then you go and you see that D is also very irrelevant. Okay? So you remove it. So you end up having how many choices?
2.
2.
2.
And then you think of the 2 until you remove or eliminate one of them, and you end up having 1 choice. See? So this is how the detective works. It's about eliminating whatever is impossible, whatever is improbable, whatever is not logical. So if you eliminate everything, so what remains would be the truth. So deduction for Holmes is an infallible methodology. Infallible means it doesn't make any errors. It's error-free. And as readers of detective fiction, we are encouraged to adopt it ourselves as we work our way through the story. Didn't I tell you that you may become another detective? And what is it that you do? You do the same thing. You start by eliminating whatever is illogical, whatever is impossible, and whatever is left, whatever remains is the truth. See? So like we said, you have all types of detail, right? And some of them are relevant. Last time we used the word relevant. This time we're using the word significant. By the way, significant and relevant are the same. So insignificant would be irrelevant. Okay. So what do I need or why? Why do you think significant details are important? Because they provide us with valuable information about the case. Whether it can be the sequence of events, can give me details about a person. Again, we're using what we call empirical evidence, dalil. And this evidence is empirical. Empirical means
Based on fact.
it doesn't start with your mind. It starts with the facts on the ground, things that you can touch. Okay, it can be drops of blood. It can be a type of clothes. It can be a gun hidden somewhere. These are all evidence. And we call them empirical because we feel them. We haven't used our mind yet. Okay, so empirical evidence is very important. And then I start putting things together using my mind and come up with conclusions. Okay, so this is if we have significant details. Why would I use insignificant detail in the novel, especially? Insignificant detail fleshes out the scene. I mean, obviously, it's a novel, so you have both. You have significant and insignificant, right? The writer has to write things, and they are not all very significant. But that's your role as a detective or as a reader to kind of take off the insignificant details at a later stage. So insignificant detail fleshes out the scene, place, person, or event described. It is true that it has no first-hand value as evidence, but it can help to form our opinions as readers. See? And this is a situation in the novel where we're introduced to Mary Marston. Mary Marston is the one who is going to call Sherlock Holmes. She's going to go to him, visit him, and say, my father has been missing for quite some time, and I want you to work on the case and see where he is and stuff. So this is Mary Marston. She's going to, of course, she's going to ask her questions, and they are going to start to put all the details together. And like we said, you will have significant relevant details and non-significant irrelevant details. And it's the job of Holmes to ask all the right questions, to kind of collect the details and put them together, and then come up with conclusions. Okay, look at how he works. Look at the work of a detective in action. He has established the following he asked her 3 questions and came up with those. First of all, he asked when Captain Marston disappeared, and then he checked whether there is material evidence, and he had that. It's a suitcase left behind. And then he asked about people that her father knew, like Major Sholto and others. So as you read, you yourself, your senses start to be provoked, stimulated, and you become part of the team of this detective, putting things together like he does. Okay. So what makes detective novels different from usual or mainstream novels like Wuthering Heights? Wuthering Heights is, among other things, a realist novel. So, unlike the realist novel, detective fiction is driven by the resolution of the plot rather than the gradual development of character. So, the plot is more important than the development of characters in a detective novel. What else would make it stand out? The structure of the detective novel is repetitive. You have repetition and predictable. You can almost tell what is going to happen next. And the narrative always offers a definitive resolution. Remember when we said that you have to have a definitive resolution. And most of the stories open with Holmes and Watson in their cozy rooms in Baker Street in London, and most end there. Again, remember when we said that detective novels satisfied a need. People were desperate for material. They know how to read and write. They don't have internet or YouTube, so they need stuff that can while away their time, that can amuse them. And the detective fiction used to play that role. Again, it has also a social function. Remember, it tells people that don't you worry, crime is under control. How can we know that? At the end of the detective novel, there is a resolution. There is a discovery of who did what. If we talk about the sign of 4 itself, we're going to find that it appeared in a single number before being published in volume form as a book. And then, of course, it's going to be serialized, put in small pieces so that it can suit the form and the style of a magazine or a newspaper. So the chapters are short, and it is designed this way to make it easy for newspapers to serialize it, to give it in serials. Serials means in pieces, in episodes. So the episodic character of the narrative, episodic means that you have it in pieces. So you open the newspaper today and you have a piece or an episode. Tomorrow you can have another piece, and so on. So the episodic character of the narrative clearly indicates the type of readership. So you're talking about people who are busy. They like reading, but they are busy in their work. Okay, they would read it while going to work, for example, waiting for at train stations, for example. So that's why you have small chunks that only last for 30 minutes or so. Okay, so as you can see, this is the story of the detective novel. Let's move somewhere else. Let's talk about Doyle himself, and Doyle is the author. Where is Doyle? What's happening? Okay. For some reason, it's fine. So, what do we know about Doyle? We know that he is um, a British author, was part of the 19th century. He was a physician or a doctor. He came from a poor family, but somehow one of his uncles, one of his relatives, funded his education. And why is it important that we're talking about Doyle himself? It's because of his job. He worked as a surgeon or as a doctor. So what is, if any, what is the commonalities between being a physician and being a detective or writing detective novels? Medicine is about what? Medicine
Find
requires.
cure for the illness.
You're excellent. The idea that you also, as a doctor, as a physician, you are also a detective, and you're also investigating. So, what is it that you're detecting or investigating?
What kind of illness this patient
Very
has?
good, right? Doctors are very accurate, right? They should be, right? This is part of their job. They should be also very precise. There is no room for error. Error can be very fatal, right? People die if you make errors, right? Doctors are also practical and scientifically minded. There is no room for emotions when it comes to medicine, in the sense that you put also things together so that you can come up with a cure. Okay? So, doctors, as you can see, make excellent detective fiction writers. They depend on the scientific method, right? You don't go to medical school if you're adabi like me, for example, right?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, so you're getting the idea. So that's
Yes.
why we're. It's very important that we read.
Excuse me, doctor. I can't see the screen. Anybody can see? Can see it?
لا, we're
No,
not. That's we're talking.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay. So again, reading the biography of Arthur Conan Doyle is very important because it can inform the discussion about the kind of fiction that he is producing, which is, like we said, detective novels. Remember what I told you about the background of this kind of novel? We said that typical of novels, it should have some kind of background. We should know about the ideas that were widespread at the time, the events, if any. And one major event that is going to stay with us till the end of the novel is the Indian Mutiny. So what's a mutiny? So Indian, we know. Indian is an adjective and it comes from India, right? So what's a mutiny?
Revolution.
Well, it depends on the perspective. Okay, if you're Indian at the time, you would consider it a revolution. If you are English and you're part of the war, obviously you have two sides. You have the Indians and you have the English. Okay? So the Indians would call it a revolution, like you're saying, but the British are going, or the English are going to call it a mutiny. You know what a mutiny is? So it's not a revolution according to the English, it's a rebellion, tamarrud. Okay? So whether it is a revolution or a rebellion or a mutiny, we have violence. And violence does not come out of thin air. There has to be reasons for this violence. So where are we when we talk about the English mutiny? We are in India. Where? Why? Why are we there? Why did we go that far? We were in the north of England. Remember when we spoke about Wuthering Heights? Why do we have as part of the setting India in the second novel? It's because, of course, of the British Empire. Britain became a big empire and it is expanding and it has colonies, mustamarat in India, in Egypt, in Sudan, in the West Indies, right? Okay. Okay, why would England or Britain go to places like Egypt and India and
Took their gold.
obviously they are not there because they like the people there. They are going to have friends over there. No, obviously not. Not this is not the reason. Even if they say that we go there because those guys are ignorant and we're trying to educate them. Those guys are non-believers and we're trying to bring Christianity to them. Their main aim is to rob those countries of their treasures, material treasures, minerals, metals, um, different types of food that they don't have back there, right? Okay, and obviously the people in those countries are not going to stay silent, right? They would revolt against the English and they kill them sometimes. Why am I telling you that? Because this is what is happening. You're going to find that there was a conspiracy of a sort. When Holmes studies the case, he's going to find that most of the characters were in India, part of the British army over there. And they had access to the treasures of the Indians, and somehow they smuggled them to Britain. They even stole them. See? And the reason why we have a crime scene, we have a murder, is because, you know, like any robbers or thieves, They work together while stealing, and when it's time to kind of divide whatever they have stolen, they start to differ and they kill each other, right? So this is what we're having in the novel. So Mr. Marston obviously was not an angel, right? And he's not even, we say Captain Marston, because captain is a military rank, and it refers back to his service in the British Army in India. Okay? So as you can see, this event that we call the Indian Mutiny is very important. So let's know more about the Indian Mutiny. So this mutiny is about resentments. People were frustrated. Indians were frustrated, especially Indians who had to work in the British Army in India. The resentments and frustrations have to do with pay, very poor pay, working conditions that are very bad. They also have to kind of every day they meet missionaries. Missionaries are, priests who come or used to, can come with the British Army. They build churches and they give the Bible to the natives, and they say you need to convert to Christianity. So obviously, the Indians, whether they are Hindus or Muslims, were not happy about this idea of converting to Christianity. They were sick and tired of those attempts. They were sick and tired of those very poor working conditions. They were sick and tired of their poor salaries. And what made it even worse would be that the English army is introducing a new kind of rifles or guns. And in order to have it work, you need to use your mouth. It has also grease, shahmia. And they were told, the Indians, whether they are Muslims or Hindus, they were told that this grease was made of fat, and this fat can be either made of pork or beef. So obviously this is, so for a Muslim to use his mouth and while using his mouth is going to have the smell and the taste of pork, this is a no. They wouldn't find it interesting. For Hindus, to also use their mouth in order to open something with the rifle, and there will be the remnants of beef. You know that Indians, the Hindus, worship cows. So to have those greased things made of beef, this was also a no. So perhaps for the first time, Muslims and Hindus come together, unite, and they start this kind of mutiny or revolution. And this is what happened. It started, and the Indians together, they started this kind of revolution, and they killed lots of people, and also after a while the English will also take revenge, and it becomes a massacre, magzara, where you have people on both sides killed and mutilated and everything. But the English wouldn't tell you that. The English would tell you that the Indians are not appreciative of what we do for them. Those guys are savage, and they're going to use all kinds of negative language against the Indians. And then they're going to write this in their novels, they're going to write that in the newspapers and everything. So what to do? You should keep your guard up, like they say. So when you read what they said about the mutiny, you don't believe them. Even calling it mutiny should be disputed and challenged, because what is a mutiny for me may be a revolution for you, right? And this is the story again, the story of this mutiny. So in various parts of India, the soldiers were joined by civilians who had their own grievance, their own complaints against the British East India Company. Again, people would fly for their life on either side. And of course, there is going to be casualties and victims. Again, you need to kind of know who is writing about what, because it's not objective. Again, where does Doyle stand when it comes to the British Empire? Does he talk much about the British Empire? Does he talk about how good it is? No, he is on the fence like this. He is a little bit neutral, but he is also, he doesn't talk much about it, but it doesn't mean that he is against the British Empire. Actually, he is more or less not a promoter, but he considers it, a fact of life. Like I told you, when the word and then the news arrived in Britain, and people knew that lots of English people were killed in this mutiny, they started to react in their novels and in their poetry. And of course, they didn't check whether, or fact check, like they say. They lashed out against the Indians, and they accused them of all types of accusations. They would say that those guys are savage, they are violent by nature, and everything. Again, like I said, lots of things, whether we're talking about newspapers reporting what happened, and even newspapers started, magazines started to call for revenge. And writers like Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins and others wrote also about the mutiny. Again, they would highlight what they call the savagery of the Indians. This is a very interesting poem that I would like you to read, to have access to. It's on the internet and downloadable. And it's called In the Round Tower of Jahansi. It's a poem where Rossetti, the poet, is saying very bad things about the Indians and how savage and how violent they are. And we also have illustrations and pictures and paintings depicting the mutiny from the perspective and the angled vision of the English. Doyle wrote the sign of for 3 decades, 30 years after the events. So we need to take whatever he says with a grain of salt because he is not an eyewitness to what happened. He takes his material from the newspapers of the time, from the correspondence of the time, from the histories of the time, from the literature of the time, but he wasn't in any way an eyewitness. This is all about the representation of the massacres, again from the perspective of the British. The British would highlight the fact that lots of British civilians with their families were killed, but they wouldn't tell you why they were killed. They wouldn't tell you why the Indians reached this stage where they would kill civilians. Again, it's years and years of bad treatment, years and years of discrimination, of poverty, and all these kinds of things. So the conclusion would be that most of the representations like that of Doyle's are text or image based rather than witness centered. You don't have eyewitness, genuine and reliable eyewitness. Again, the focus would be on appealing to the British people and making them believe that the Indians are savage and violent and everything. Okay, we'll stop on this note and we'll continue next week. Like I said, I would love to, for us to have an extra class. So how about that? I'm thinking of having the extra class before the regular class. The regular class is going to be on Tuesday, and I would like the extra class to be on Sunday. Would you be available on Sunday?
Yes, doctor, for me.
Okay, so
No, doctor, for me, I have a quiz.
you at what time? I'll give you choices. How about 10 a.m. on Sunday? Would 10 a.m. be fine with you? Hello.
Yes, doctor, fine.
Okay, so Sunday at 10 a.m. everyone. Okay, and of course the regular class is on Tuesday as scheduled.
Yeah.
Right, what is it that we're going to do? We're going to finish off the sign of form chart. Make sure you read it. It's not big, and that's very interesting. I'll see you inshallah next week, and have a pleasant weekend. Salam alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
You're welcome. Bye bye.